The sun rose over the desert in November 1942, bleeding across the endless sands of North Africa. Dust swirled in the chill air as German panzers, engines rumbling, advanced confidently toward the thin American lines near El Getter. For veterans of Rommel's Afrika Korps, the scene was familiar. Tanks were the gods of the battlefield, and infantry usually scattered before them, inside the cramped turret of a Panzer IV. Lieutenant Karl Hoffmann, fictionalized, but based on countless real accounts, smiled grimly. He believed, like many, that nothing the inexperienced Americans carried could harm him. Their rifles would only scratch paint. But then he saw it. A group of U.S. soldiers crouched in a wadi, one man hefting a strange tubular object across his shoulder. It looked like a piece of plumbing pipe, absurdly light against the dark bulk of a tank. Hoffmann laughed and barked to his crew, "Look at that toy." Seconds later, a streak of fire tore through the air. A rocket slammed into the lead panzer. The explosion shook the earth. Flames poured from the hatch as steel warped and men screamed. Hoffmann froze. A toy had just gutted 20 tons of armor. What would you have thought if you were him? The battlefield filled with a new sound, whooshing launches, followed by the sickening thunder of rockets finding their mark. According to U.S. Army reports, more than 600 of these M1 bazookas had been rushed to North Africa by late 1942. They were crude, ungainly, and even unreliable, but in the hands of desperate GIs. They transformed the battlefield. German tankers, trained to fear artillery and aircraft, suddenly realized that even a lone foot soldier could end their steel advantage. "We were not prepared for this," wrote one prisoner later. Captured near Kasserine. The Americans carried pipes that spat fire. "We thought tanks ruled everything, now we hid from infantry." What the Germans didn't yet know was that the bazooka had been developed in secret, tested in Maryland only months earlier. It was rushed into production as America entered the war, each unit costing just $36 to build, compared to the thousands of Reichsmarks for a panzer. The imbalance was terrifying. By nightfall, the smell of burning fuel filled the desert wind. Wrecked tanks littered the sand, their turrets twisted, tracks mangled, armor peeled open like tin. American infantry moved cautiously among them, bazookas slung across shoulders, smoke still rising from the barrels. Inside his damaged panzer, Hoffmann stared at the floor, unable to comprehend how his invincible machine had been crippled so easily. He scribbled in his diary later, a fictionalized but authentic echo of many accounts. "We used to laugh at American soldiers. Today I saw my comrades burned alive by a weapon that should not exist. A simple tube, and yet it destroys a tank." The desert sky glowed red that night, and across the front, German commanders filed frantic reports. What was this weapon? How many did the Americans have? Could tanks still advance without fear? But the real answer was even more unsettling. This was only the beginning, and what they saw next, in Sicily, would be even more shocking. In early 1943, German intelligence officers sifted through charred wreckage from North Africa, bent rocket tubes, scorched fragments of fins, twisted steel plates punctured in neat circles. Reports flowed back to Berlin the Americans had created a lightweight, shoulder-fired anti-tank weapon. Field Marshal Rommel himself warned in dispatches that enemy infantry now possess a means of defeating our panzers at close range. The response was disbelief. Could something so small really cripple a Panzer IV or even a Tiger? Engineers demanded captured samples. When the first intact bazooka was recovered, it was rushed to German testing grounds at Kummersdorf. What they found horrified them at 100 yards. The shape-charge warhead could penetrate 75 millimeters of armor, according to archival records. German officers immediately copied the design, leading to their own Panzerschreck. But by the time production ramped up, the psychological shock had already spread through the ranks. How would you feel if a soldier with a $36 tube could destroy your $200,000 tank? For American infantrymen, the bazooka quickly became more than just a weapon, it was a lifeline. Letters home described the thrill and terror of firing it. Private James O'Donnell wrote in February 1943, The thing kicks like a mule and screams like the devil. But when it hits, the tank just stops. You feel 10 feet tall. The U.S. Army recognized its symbolic power. No longer were GIs helpless against iron monsters. With the bazooka, even a farm boy from Kansas could face down a panzer and win. Military propaganda films showed clean-cut soldiers knocking out tanks with ease, spreading confidence across the ranks. And this was the other secret, unlike complex artillery. The bazooka required little training. 2 men, a firer and a loader, could master it in a day. That simplicity terrified German commanders. A weapon of the people, cheap, fast, effective, undermined decades of armored supremacy. Behind the front lines, American factories poured out thousands of launchers and millions of rockets. According to quartermaster records, over 476,000 bazookas were produced during the war. Assembly lines in Detroit, Chicago, and Philadelphia hummed with activity. Women in overalls bolted launchers together. Children collected scrap to fuel production. And advertisements bragged that America's workers were arming their boys overseas. For German observers, this was the deeper nightmare. Every bazooka on the battlefield was proof of America's industrial miracle. Where Germany struggled with shortages, America overflowed with abundance. Tanks were costly, slow, and vulnerable. Bazookas were cheap, fast, and everywhere. At night, German tank crews whispered of ambushes. Would the next hedgerow hide a man with a tube? Would the next alley conceal a soldier waiting to fire? A panzer commander noted bitterly in his logbook, "It is no longer artillery that we fear, but the invisible man with the American pipe." But the most dramatic proof of this came not in the desert, but in the rocky hills of Sicily. And there, the bazooka would change the course of invasion itself. July 10, 1943. Dawn broke over the beaches of southern Sicily as waves of American and British troops surged ashore. German and Italian defenders expected the same story they had seen since 1939, armor rolling forward to crush infantry in open ground. But Sicily would not play by those old rules. As panzer divisions counterattacked near Gela, American soldiers dug into vineyards and stone-walled fields. In the distance, German tank turrets glinted in the Mediterranean sun. Infantrymen clutched their rifles nervously until sergeants barked orders and teams unfolded strange metal tubes from their packs. The bazookas were here. The first rockets whooshed across the dusty air, slamming into advancing panzers. Explosions echoed through olive groves, according to after-action reports. In just the first days, bazooka teams accounted for dozens of destroyed or disabled tanks. German officers recorded with frustration, "Our armor is no longer decisive. The enemy meets us with tubes that burn like torches. Would you have stood your ground, facing down steel beasts with only a shoulder-fired tube?" For many German soldiers, Sicily was the moment the myth of armored invincibility died. They had grown up on propaganda posters of unstoppable panzers crossing rivers and smashing cities. But now, those same tanks lay smoking in orchards, their black plumes staining the sky. Lieutenant Hoffmann, our fictionalized lens into this war, wrote in his diary, "I once trusted in armor more than faith itself. Now, I see tanks halted by peasants with pipes. Is this what the Reich has come to our steel undone by American toys?" For American infantry, the psychological reversal was profound. At Kasserine, they had been crushed by tanks. At Sicily, they destroyed them. Soldiers cheered as they watched German crews abandon machines, fleeing on foot from men who only weeks before would have been slaughtered. One GI scrawled on the side of a wrecked Panzer bazooka did this. Photographs of such moments circulated back home, stoking morale and fueling the mythos of the weapon. But Sicily was not just a battlefield victory. It was a lesson in modern war. Infantry armed with portable anti-tank weapons had changed the balance forever. No longer could tanks roam freely, crushing defenses with impunity. Each ruined panzer was a signal to German high command the age of armored dominance was over. And still, the Americans refined their weapon, upgraded warheads, improved propellants, faster production. By late 1943, tens of thousands of bazookas flooded the front lines. Meanwhile, German tank crews grew increasingly anxious. Diaries from the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division reveal the fear. At night, we dream of pipes. Every wall may hide one. Every corner may burn us alive. If Sicily shook German confidence, Normandy would shatter it completely. And in the hedgerows of France, the bazooka would become a nightmare beyond anything the panzers had ever faced. June 6, 1944. The beaches of Normandy thundered with fire as Allied troops clawed their way inland. By mid-June, the battle shifted from sand to hedgerows, dense earthen walls lined with tangled greenery, creating natural fortresses. For German panzer crews, this terrain seemed perfect. They had the armor, the training, the advantage. But hidden in those hedgerows, American infantrymen waited with bazookas. The moment a tank rumbled down a narrow lane, the stillness broke a streak of smoke, a roar, then fire consuming steel. Veterans of the Eastern Front, men who had faced Soviet T-34s in open plains, found themselves undone by farmers' sons crouched in bushes. Archival reports reveal that in Normandy alone, bazooka teams accounted for thousands of damaged or destroyed armored vehicles. Each hedgerow became a trap. Each tank advance turned into a funeral procession. Would you have dared to climb into a panzer, knowing every shadow could hide death? For the Germans, the worst was not only the losses, but the uncertainty. Artillery could be predicted. Aircraft could be heard. But the bazooka was silent until it struck. Tankers described the whoosh of rockets and the sudden blast against their hulls, giving them only seconds to live. One captured German officer confessed under interrogation. "We fear the bazooka more than your tanks. At least tanks we can see. This weapon, we never know from where it will come." Inside the cramped turret of his panzer, Hoffman scratched his thoughts into a notebook. "I trust no road, no village, no hedgerow. The Americans are everywhere. It is like fighting ghosts armed with fire." His words echoed the despair spreading through German units. Meanwhile, American soldiers told a different story. Corporal Ray Miller of the 29th Infantry recalled, "It felt like David against Goliath. You see a tank, you grab your buddy, you aim, and suddenly the giant falls. For once, the ordinary infantrymen held the power." By late July, entire French villages reeked of smoke and fuel. Burned-out hulks of panzers lined the hedgerows. Farmers returned to fields littered with twisted armor. Children climbed on tanks that only days earlier had inspired terror. Quartermaster figures showed the scale in 1944 alone. The U.S. shipped over 1.6 million bazooka rockets to Europe. That number dwarfed Germany's ability to replace its armor. For every panzer rolled out of a German factory, dozens of bazookas waited in the hands of American GIs. The psychological effect rippled through the Wehrmacht. Once, tank crews were the elite, respected and envied. Now, they were hunted prey. A soldier noted in his letter, "We used to look down on infantry. Now we beg them to walk before us, to keep the bazookas away." But the deadliest blow was still to come. As the Allies pushed east, German tankers faced the collapse of confidence itself. And by 1945, the bazooka would haunt their every step, a shadow that no armor could escape. By the winter of 1944 to 45, the once mighty image of German armor was collapsing. In the Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge panzer divisions rolled forward through snow-covered forests, engines growling with one last, desperate push. But in every village, every crossroads, American infantry waited. Bazooka teams crouched behind stone barns, in foxholes, even under bridges. When the rocket struck, white snow turned black with smoke. Panthers and tigers, pride of the Wehrmacht, burned against the frozen landscape. For German soldiers, the shock was unbearable. The very weapons they believed invincible were now reduced to twisted wrecks. Captured diaries tell the same story. A tank gunner wrote near Bastogne, "We drive blind into forests of ghosts. Every flash from the trees may be our last. Bazookas, they are everywhere. Would you still climb into a steel coffin, knowing the smallest soldier could end you with a single rocket? The psychological collapse spread faster than the physical destruction. Panzer crews who once laughed at American inexperience now whispered of ambushes at every bend. Letters intercepted by Allied censors revealed the despair. We fear the little tubes more than your great bombers. Bombs may miss. The bazooka never does. Even propaganda could not hide the truth. German newsreels avoided showing tank wrecks. But soldiers at the front saw the reality: daily rows of burned panzers lining roads, their hulks stripped by villagers for scrap. Meanwhile, American soldiers gained confidence with each successful shot. Private Harold Johnson remembered. The first time I saw a tiger knocked out by a bazooka, I knew this war had turned. They weren't gods anymore. They were just men and machines. By early 1945, the Reich was running out of fuel, out of steel, out of time. American industry, by contrast, poured out weapons in endless streams. Quartermaster reports show that more than 2.3 million bazooka rockets were delivered to Europe by spring. Every street corner, every ruined farmhouse could conceal a launcher. Tank commanders began to abandon their machines. Accounts from the 9th Panzer Division describe crews leaving their armor behind and fighting on foot, preferring rifles to what they now called death traps. One officer wrote bitterly, "The tank is no longer our fortress. It is our grave." Lieutenant Hoffman, our witness throughout, penned his final entry as his unit retreated across the Rhine. "Once we believed tanks were the future. Now I believe they are the past. The Americans carry their future on their shoulders, and it is called the bazooka." The collapse of confidence was complete. Armor no longer meant victory, it meant vulnerability. But the true shock for German troops was not just the weapon itself. It was what the bazooka revealed about the enemy who carried it. Behind every bazooka on the battlefield stood a nation of factories, workers, and endless resources. In America, production never stopped. At Willow Run in Michigan, a bomber rolled off the line every 63 minutes. In smaller plants, thousands of bazooka tubes and rockets were stamped, welded, and packed for shipping overseas. Archival figures confirm by 1945, nearly 500,000 launchers and millions of rockets had been produced. To German eyes, this was terrifying. A single panzer division required months of assembly, rare metals, and scarce fuel. But the Americans could outfit an entire division with bazookas in a week. The contrast was absolute scarcity versus abundance, desperation versus confidence. Would you not feel dread, seeing your empire strangled by pipes and rockets built faster than you could build your future? For German soldiers, the bazooka became more than a weapon. It became a symbol. It represented the failure of their leaders' promises, the fragility of the Reich's invincible steel, and the crushing weight of American industry. One POW, interviewed in 1945, admitted, "We thought we fought men, but we fought a machine, a nation of machines. Even their smallest weapon was endless." Hoffman, the young lieutenant who had first dismissed the toy pipe in North Africa, now marched eastward as a prisoner, his diary tucked away. His last entry read, "The bazooka was not only a weapon of the soldier, it was a weapon of a people. It spoke of their factories, their abundance, their freedom to imagine and build. We did not lose to the tube alone. We lost to the idea behind it." The Nazi dream of armored dominance collapsed in smoke and fire. What once symbolized invincibility, steel tracks crushing cities, tanks parading through boulevards, was undone by cheap weapons in the hands of ordinary men. This reversal broke more than divisions. It broke faith. Soldiers who had believed in the Reich's superiority now doubted everything. American commanders understood this. They saw the bazooka not just as a weapon, but as psychological warfare. Each burning tank was a message technology. When paired with mass production and democracy's manpower, could shatter tyranny by war's end. Even as Germany fielded its monstrous Tiger II and experimental jet fighters, The truth was unavoidable. No weapon, no matter how advanced, could withstand an enemy whose simplest arms were made by the millions. And so, the bazooka was remembered not merely as a tube of steel and explosives, but as a symbol of America's deeper strength industry, adaptability, and the spirit of a citizen army. The flames of the bazooka burned away more than tanks. They burned away illusions. The war that began with thunderous parades of tanks across Europe ended with those same machines rusting in fields, their hulks abandoned, their crews broken. The bazooka, simple and unassuming, had stripped the armor from the myth. It proved that no empire, no matter how proud, could forever hide behind steel. What lingered in the minds of German soldiers was not only the roar of rockets or the sight of comrades fleeing burning turrets. It was the realization that the battlefield had changed, and with it, the world. The bazooka symbolized a deeper truth that innovation and industry, when placed in the hands of ordinary men, could overcome even the strongest war machines. According to quartermaster records, millions of rockets were shipped across oceans, more than enough to stock every village street of Europe. Behind every launcher stood the factories of Detroit, the labor of women riveting in night shifts, the raw power of a nation unbroken by bombs. For German troops who had known only rationing and scarcity, this abundance was unimaginable. Hoffman's diary closes with quiet resignation. We did not lose to a weapon. We lost to a world that built it. His words reflect not just his defeat, but the collapse of an ideology that worshipped iron and conquest. And so, the bazooka endures as more than a relic of war. It is a reminder that strength lies not in monuments of steel alone, but in the resilience of people, the will to adapt, and the unity of purpose. Tanks may crumble, empires may fall, but ideas carried on the shoulders of common soldiers can change the course of history.